Hi, everybody. How are you? Good. Oh, excellent. It's wonderful to see you here tonight. Welcome to everyone for this very, very special occasion. We're so happy to have you here at the Norman Rockwell Museum. My name is Stephanie Plunkett. I'm Deputy Director and Chief Curator, and it has really been very exciting to see this special exhibition, Never Abandon Imagination, the Fantastical Art of Tony DiTerlizzi, take shape. I'd like to congratulate my fellow curator, Jesse Kowalski, who did a beautiful job with this exhibition, and to say what a special pleasure it has actually been to be able to partner with such a talented artist. We have really appreciated Tony's enthusiasm, his vision, and we have really benefited from the collaboration. It's really been a joy. In fact, we worked very closely on this beautiful catalog, which just came in yesterday, thank goodness. And thankfully, with Tony's help and Jesse's guidance, it all came together beautifully. Of course, with many thanks to our wonderful staff. In the exhibition, which is a space to contemplate the wonders of the imagination, you will encounter many things, from more than 200 examples of Tony's exceptional artwork, to an audio-visual tour designed by my colleague Rich Bradway right over there, to several fascinating interactives, a floating fairy cloud, which was Tony's invention, and a field guide to Tony's characters. For about the next hour, in a conversation between Tony DiTerlizzi and exhibit curator Jesse Kowalski, you'll have the chance to learn more about Tony's work. But we'll also leave time for questions at the end, so if there's anything that hasn't been covered, we will look forward to hearing about what you'd like to know. After that, after our program, we'll invite you to enjoy the works on view, have some refreshments, and then the main part of our wonderful celebration will begin. So we are so happy you're here. I know they need little introduction, and especially Tony, but I would like to give you some background on our speakers. Illustrator Tony DiTerlizzi established his career as the creator of fantastical imagery, inspired by the visions of fairies, trolls, sprites, and goblins. Just as his early work for Dungeons & Dragons and Magic the Gathering is treasured by devoted fans of the gaming genre, Tony's award-winning and best-selling books, the Spiderwick Chronicles, Ted, The Spider and the Fly, the WondLa trilogy, and the story of Diva and Flea, among others, have inspired a new generation of young readers. His inspirations, explored in this exhibition, recall the paintings and drawings of such great illustrators as Arthur Rackham, Edmund Dulac, Norman Rockwell, Maxfield Parrish, and Brian Froud, in addition to noted ornithologist and painter John James Audubon. Were it not for his pixies, elves, griffins, and mermaids present in his 2005 publication, Arthur Spiderwick's Field Guide to the Fantastical World Around You, the book could easily be confused for Audubon's seminal 1827 tome, The Birds of America. Tony is also the author and illustrator of Jimmy Zangwow Out of This World Moon Pie Adventure, and we will have moon pies at the opening. So you've got to have one. And the Zena Sutherland award-winning book, Ted. As a believer in the healing power of stories, Tony has held author events for children in hospitals all over the world, and he has been honored with the title of Global Ambassador by the Starlight Children's Foundation. We are thrilled to have Tony with us. Jesse M. Kowalski, curator of exhibitions here at the Norman Rockwell Museum, joined our staff 2 years ago in 2015, and since that time, he has been an invaluable member of our curatorial team. The curator of such popular exhibitions as Hanna-Barbera, the architects of Saturday Morning, and Inventing America, Rockwell and Warhol, which I had the joy of collaborating with him on, are two popular exhibitions that were greatly enjoyed by our visitors. Jesse's also organized Superheroes and Superstars, The Art of Alex Ross, which is currently traveling to other museum venues, and he is currently working on an exhibition featuring the art of Frank Miller, which we look forward to mounting in the summer of 2019, which is the museum's 50th anniversary. Prior to joining the Norman Rockwell Museum staff, Jesse served as Director of Exhibitions at the Andy Warhol Museum, where he was employed for 18 years, curating many of the Warhol Museum's traveling exhibitions and in-house installations, including Andy Warhol portraits, The Prince of Andy Warhol, From A to B and Back Again, and Heroes and Villains, the comic book art of Alex Ross, which traveled here to the Norman Rockwell Museum in 2012. In addition, he has designed and overseen the installation of exhibits at dozens of museums in 15 countries, and designed the reinstallation of the Andy Warhol Museum's permanent collection. So he has done a fabulous job no matter where he's been. It's now my great pleasure to introduce both Jesse and Tony for a wonderful conversation. Thank you again for being here. Okay, so I forgot excuse me, I forgot something very important, which is that Frank Miller is actually here in spirit to introduce our event this evening. So without further ado, a message from Frank Miller.
Hey Tony, wish I could be there, I really do, but they got me stuck here, you understand. Meanwhile, have a great show. Can't wait to see you.
So yeah, we're here with Tony tonight. We've become good friends over the past couple of years. It was November 2015 when I first went to your house and twisted your arm, and we talked about doing a show here. We're just going to go through a quick PowerPoint slideshow of some images I put together, and have Tony
comment.
Tell us the stories behind them. Tony.
Well, this is the exhibition poster, and it took a while to do, but it's kind of a cross section of my life up to this point. This year marks 25 years that I've been published, and I've done a lot of amazing things, and I've got to work with a lot of amazing people, and I felt that there was no singular image that could capture that. So I wanted to have characters from all my different aspects of my life be reflected in this image. And I put myself on a diet also for this image. And perhaps a little more hair.
Is there any small details you want to point out? People might not catch.
Well, yeah, I mean, it starts from my days at Dungeons and Dragons. These are, as game designer Colin McComb will tell you, these are kobolds from Dragon Mountain. And this kobold in the front is holding Dragon Mountain. And Dragon Mountain was the first Dungeons & Dragons game I illustrated when I began to work for TSR in 1992. And it goes all the way up through my history to Tinsel, which is a Christmas fairy who's standing on top of my easel, which is the picture book I'm currently working on right now.
Excellent.
Do you want more than that? No,
that's good.
That's good. That's good.
So yeah, here's a great picture of Tony with the father from Ted. Part of the reason I wanted to work with Tony was because of his great childlike attitude and sense of humor and desire to create imagination in his publications.
That's what I look like every time I win an auction on eBay, pretty much. That's it right there. There it is. That's it.
One thing I wanted to start out with was this folder that Tony did, I think when he was about 12 years old. It's called The New Realm in Nature and Science Fiction Combined. You are exploring Gondwana Land.
Gondwana Land.
Yeah, so within this folder when he was 12, there's a map shown here that is very detailed on the Snow World. You've got the Deep Dying Desert, Devil's Lake, and then TD Point.
Well,
and yeah, but also within this folder, Tony created a passport for himself. I think one for your sister.
Yes.
Also, dozens of characters and very detailed descriptions of characters. And when I asked Tony if we could include things like this in the show, I got this response. He was very. I think you were a little concerned about including some of these things.
At first. Yeah, because they're horrible. They're terribly I mean, I'm thinking that even with the finished stuff, because you're like, we're going to hang a Rockwell next to that, and I'm like, I don't know if you should do that. That's really going to show. But I think as part of this process for me, that wow, you scanned that in there, didn't you? You did. Notebook paper. You know, part of the process that came was the story of the show. It's not just a bunch of art hanging on a wall. And what soon became very apparent to me was that you didn't just want Spiderwick you didn't just want the greatest hits. You wanted actually my journey. And in this retrospective, which I guess is true to the spirit, you start to look backwards and connect dots throughout your life and how they start to inform things later in your life. And so this notebook drawn in markers, and because I watched Wile E. Coyote, I therefore knew Latin. So this lizard is biggest, baddest, mama-is. So now you guys know Latin. That's it. You just describe it in add is to the end. But this becomes kind of it's definitely conjured from Dungeons and Dragons. It's conjured from field guides, but it also serves as the blueprint for a lot of things in my life that come later.
Here's some Dungeons and Dragons character sheets. One for Tony and one for your sister. But I just want to point out, if you notice, Tony's strength, intelligence, and wisdom exceed his sister's. Would you like to make a formal apology?
I would definitely like to apologize. First, I don't even know if you're a girl, Jen. I mean, you just look like a Bilbo Baggins, but kind of with like scared eyes. I definitely was looking at a lot of Jim Davis for Garfield, so that is a John Arbuncle elf. If you've ever wondered what that would look like, that's it. And I think because of all the blue smears, this is probably drawn in an eraser mate, which would make it very, very vintage. Those who are old enough to remember that, they'll know exactly what that means. I'm wondering what else I gave myself. Boy, I've got a lot of arrows, but she's got a lot of arrows too.
Yeah, you've got a ventriloquism spell.
Well, yeah, of course. Of course I have a ventriloquism spell, Jesse.
Yeah, so another thing that we like to include in the exhibit is some of the early works that Tony did, inspired by Dungeons and Dragons, and then the works he did as a professional illustrator. Yeah,
it's that's what doing the same thing over and over again for nearly 50 years will get you.
Yep.
There you go. More. I copied. I learned by copying. I mean, I grew up in a very artistic household. There were art books, but even like fine art books, if they didn't speak to me, a lot of times illustrations often did. And so there are many examples throughout my entire life of me, copying art, and especially here, the Dungeons and Dragons had a very deep impact on me. Very, very.
And could you tell us about some of the toys and the items that influenced your childhood?
I mean, honestly, do I need to tell you what any of these things? I mean, this is it. This is what you. I mean, I played a lot. I mean, I kind of would sit in my room and would pretend. And Mom read The House at Pooh Corner when we were young, and it was hearing that story that I realized that toys come to life when you play with them. And so I spent many, many hours. And when you guys would send me to my room, there were times okay, you can come out now. No, the battle is just heating up. I'm good. So I mean, I love Star Wars. Obviously, what kid didn't? I also love Smokey and the Bandit, as evidenced by this old Trans Am.
And is that your first Dungeons and Dragons set there?
That is the original set as I came to play it, and that is my original Winnie the Pooh. And Dad and I would do these plastic dinosaur models. I love dinosaurs. I loved coloring books. I mean, it's all there. And then these are the little plastic toys that I played with that we would have bought at like a dollar store. But then they also happen to be the inspiration for Dungeons and Dragons as well. Oh man!
I apologize, Tony.
Wow.
I'm sorry.
Wow.
No, this is really not to embarrass Tony.
Wow. I'm glad I'm actually wearing shorts.
Yeah.
It almost, It's
No,
almost like, let me get my short shorts on for this one.
No, I wanted to talk a little bit about Tony's devotion and dedication. How many of these did you do over one summer?
A lot, right, Mom, Dad? It was about 50 or so. I mean, it was we grew up loving music. Was always a big part of our household. We always had records playing from as young as I could remember, and it was rock and pop, a lot of classic stuff. And I think when you're a teenager, you look for heroes, and for me, I found a lot of it also in music. And of course, this is the era when MTV first came out. So now musicians were no longer just a picture on an LP sleeve; they were on TV all the time. And so, I did a drawing each day or every couple of days over the summer because I was bored. I mean, the same thing with the WondLa. It was the same thing. I did a couple monsters each day, and that's how, frankly, that's how books get made. That's how I get through my deadlines now. You do a little bit each day. It's always a marathon. It's never a sprint. I have to point something out as I'm glancing at this. If you guys look by my foot, there's Van Halen, and clearly Eddie Van Halen had gotten a haircut from when I first drew this to when I finished it, because you can see the whiteout where I remember taping his head with the hair. His hair's been cut. But there's a lot of my favorites there at the time. Princess in a Bathtub. Yeah.
Cool, Tony?
Cool. Trying so hard to be cool, Tony. That's high school. That would be senior year of high school. Taken by my art teacher, Tom Wetzel, in his class.
And this is a project you worked on with Mr. Wetzel.
This is a project, so in my senior year, I'm going to rob a little of Peter to pay Paul here, because I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but I think this is a good spot to talk about it. In my senior year, I had taken every art class possible. I loved art. I was starting to realize this is who I am. And I had taken every class that the school offered. I went to a public school down in South Florida, South Fork High, and out by the river. And my high school art teacher, Tom Wetzel, realized I had potential, but he also knew that I was probably going to need financial aid. I was going to need to apply for scholarships and grants, as well as apply for art schools. So he had what's called a planning period, which I don't know what mystery thing happens. I don't know if that's where the teachers go shopping, they smoke cigarettes, I'm not sure. They're supposedly grade papers. But Tom had me come into his class, and we did a one-on-one project, just one teacher, one student. And he said, I want you to do something really special for your portfolio. And I dilly-dallied for about a week. I couldn't come up. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I could tell it was like, all right, listen, it's Friday. When you come in Monday, you need to figure this out, dude. So I went home, and my brother was reading Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. He's a little bit younger, so he's an avid reader. And I thought, oh my gosh, I loved this book so much. And I thought, oh, what if I did like my version of Alice in Wonderland? And so I came back on Monday. I was very excited about it. And again, I spent the entire summer. And here's where the caricature. So the Elton John becomes the Mad Hatter. I looked at a lot of anime, and that informed Alice. The caterpillar you saw was very inspired by Jim Henson's Muppets. And this incredible thing happened. I don't know if you can tell in the photos, but if you look at the lights at the top, they look kind of fluorescent. I colored it in markers, and then I colored it in a highlighter, and then if you looked at it under a black light, the pictures would glow. So I remember handing this book in at the end of the semester, and then my dad had put like a black light in a little flashlight, and then handing him a flashlight to do it. And the final thing I'll say about that is, those years in high school are, I'm sure you guys, a lot of you remember that microcosm of high school is brutal. The social weirdness that goes on, and I wasn't sporty, I wasn't a jock, I wasn't in band, I wasn't a surfer, which was big in our school. I'm literally like, I think I want to draw kids' books. And like, that is not a lady killer, Jesse. That's not gonna get them lining up. But the darndest thing happened, kids heard about this book, and I'd be in class, and they're like, hey, Tony, heard you drew some book about Alice in Wonderland. And I'm like, talking to me? Can I see that book? And I'd hand him the book. Then I'd hand him a black light. And I got this incredible validation from all these other kids. And I knew then that I wanted to do children's books for the rest of my life. And that was it.
So,
why is that funny?
So after college, you...
Good luck with that, kid.
Yeah, some of your friends convinced you to send in some of your drawings of monsters to TSR, the parent company.
To TSR,
D&D.
yeah. I graduated college and did what you do when you graduate college. You move back home.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I reconnected with some of my childhood friends, and we started playing Dungeons and Dragons, and they encouraged me to send my stuff. I just graduated art school, and I submitted drawings and kept submitting drawings over and over again. It took a while to get in, but eventually I did it. This is one of them, yeah.
And you actually cut out your drawings and put them in D&D pages, right?
Yeah, so I took a module and I cut out my own drawings and pasted them on top of the text so that the game designers could see what my art would look like in their books.
Smart kid.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that would be the best way to help them envision it. And then look what happens.
Yeah. So your first job was Dragon Mountain, and then the Monsters Manual.
The Monsters Manual I did in late 1992, early 1993. The TSR at the time had published a black and white monster manual, which probably many people grew up with. They had done a second one in the 80s, which was okay, but not so great. And then they were going to do the first full colored rendition of the classic monsters. And I was asked to render over 100 of these monsters that you know, I had loved drawing as a kid. And I drew them at the same kitchen table that I had drawn them at, you know, 10 years earlier.
Yeah, after I watched Stranger Things 2, I emailed Tony. I said, have you finished Stranger Things 2 yet? I said, we've got 2 mind flayers in the show.
Yes, yes. And I had no idea what you're talking about. And then we watched it and went, oh. Yeah. This is my studio in Florida when I worked on Planescape and Dungeons and Dragons during the...
Yes, some of these pieces are in the show. The display should be here.
There they are.
Fire Giant.
Yeah, yeah. Look, they're less sun... Now you know when the sun bleaching happened, Jesse. It's right there. That's it. Yeah.
And then you went to work on Planescape.
Yes, I after the Monsters Manual came out, I was contacted again by TSR, and one of the great designers there, David Zeb Cook, was working...
Who's here tonight?
He is here tonight. David Cook, give it up. He was creating a new setting for Dungeons & Dragons called Planescape, which kind of took all the mythologies of gaming and where they had, you know, borrowed all mythologies from classical mythology and folklore and put it into one world. And David was working with an in-house artist by the name of Dana Knutson, but Dana was kind of like a concept artist, and so what they wanted me to do was do these interior drawings for the to kind of create a look for the game. And so for several years I was the only artist illustrating these books, which was I believe probably a first for TSR at the time. I don't know if they've done it since or my memory's faded, but it was an amazing time, and I learned a lot.
Yeah, and what we're talking about first, this is the first time Dungeons & Dragons artwork has been exhibited in an art museum. Is that correct?
As far as I know, yes. It's the first time Dungeons & Dragons art's finally getting... I'm honored that it's me, but yes, I'm very happy to see that the Dungeons & Dragons art is now hanging in a museum. That's one of Angela's, my wife Angela's high school friends, Marta. One of Angela's best friends, Kim Pilla, was an aspiring photographer at the time. And Kim would take these photos of her friends and she would give me these stacks of photos. And from time to time I would try to use them for reference for the books. This is New York City in Brooklyn. Close to the end of my time working on Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, I see the Ted's Party Hat.
Ted's Party Hat. So Jimmy Zangwa would have probably been out by now. So this is probably like 2001-ish, probably. Yeah.
And the Mind Flayer here is
There's
on
another
the
Mind
walls.
Flayer. Yeah, yes. Yeah. I'm thinking there's a big. I'm looking at Wayne Barlow, who is an incredible science fiction artist that I did for this one. And so the Mind Flayer uses his tentacles and he eats your brains. You can see the scorch marks on all the skulls that he's collected, including mine in the very bottom left, where he's sucked my brains out.
That's great.
Here's some more. This was done later for a collection done by Dark Horse Comics, and Dennis Kitchen and his partner John Lynn did a book called Realms, which collected all my gaming art over the years, and I did new art for it, and these are a couple of the newer drawings that were done for that book.
And then this was on the cover of Dragon magazine?
This was the cover of Dragon magazine, and you know, back then the magazine was called Dragon, so they were just like, just put a dragon in it. That's really all you got to do, and that was incredibly freeing to be able to come up with stuff. So I was a huge fan of The Reluctant Dragon. I love that story, and I wanted to do a scene from The Reluctant Dragon, and so this was a scene where the boy is playing a game of chess with it, and there's the dice bag, and if you look, there's a book called Dungeons, and there's dice. So it's a clear homage to, obviously, my love of games and gaming.
And where did you find that handsome model?
I don't know where he is. He's long gone. That dark head of hair and that thin waistline is long gone, Jesse. I don't know where he is.
And then you went to work for Magic the Gathering?
I got to work for Wizards of the Coast through another artist named Rebecca Gay, and Rebecca I met in my years living in Brooklyn, and she was doing artwork for Magic the Gathering and thought I would be a great fit, and so she introduced me to the art director, and I worked with them for many, many years and did over 100 cards. And this is a big transition. If you guys are looking at the art, it kind of goes from pen and ink drawings, and now it starts to get more painterly, more colorful. The Planescape stuff was meant to be kind of rusty and gritty and dirty and old, and Magic didn't have those parameters, a little bit different. And so I'm now experimenting with opaque paint really for the first time, and color, and the deadlines were a little more open, they were a little longer. So less art to do, and the same amount of time allowed me to start honing my technical skills. And there's Realms, which collects it all. And there's a big owl bear.
And then you transitioned to children's literature.
Well, I had always wanted to do, you know, picture books, and the truth of the matter was I couldn't do it from Florida. I would send in submissions from my home, and they just, you know, thanks but no thanks, rejection letters if I even got those. And so I knew that I was probably going to have to move to New York if I was going to make it. And so Angela and I moved up to New York, and there's a crazy story where Angela was a makeup artist. I'd gone to all the houses, dropped off my portfolio, got rejections at every single house. Angela does makeup for a gal who had a Scholastic bag. She'd worked at Scholastic. She probably did the book fairs, I think, is probably what she did. And Ange got her claws into her and was able to extract a business card. And so I came in the next morning to drop off my portfolio, and this gal at book fairs was like, well, I can't hire you, but boy, your stuff is really quite good. Let me get an art director in here. So she calls, oh, this art director's not answering. She calls again, oh, this art director's not answering. Let me call some editors. She calls first editor, wow, no one's answering. And then this assistant editor comes in by the name of Kevin Lewis. And Kevin grew up in the South, so he knew exactly what a moon pie was. And on top of that, he also saw the potential in me when I probably didn't see it myself. And Kevin couldn't get Scholastic to buy any of my books, so he left Scholastic. He went to Simon & Schuster, and my book was the first picture book that he acquired. And I worked with Kevin for over 10 years. He changed my life. He's an amazing person. And he's also here tonight. So Kevin, you know I'm thinking of you.
And you followed up with Ted.
Followed up with Ted. I actually followed it up with an alphabet book, and Kevin said, yeah, that's not going to work, but I like this guy. Tell me the story about this guy. And so that was a great challenge.
Now, and Jimmy Zangwa and Ted, both of the Grimble Grinder and Ted have buttons for belly buttons.
Yeah, that means there was some kind of parent and an umbilical cord at some point, Jesse, and I'm not sure why buttons.
How does that work?
I don't ask too many questions. I just kind of go with it. Both of these books were kind of this. I was really fascinated with this, actually, appropriately. Growing up looking at Norman Rockwell, I was that era before I was alive of the 50s and the 40s and even the early 60s seems so amazing, seems so fun to be alive, to be a kid, based on these images that Rockwell depicted. And so we really went on this once upon a time it was 1950 or once upon a time it was 1960, because that felt both as immediate and as far away to me as an adult. And so that's why these stories take place in this time, but they are very much heavily reliant on the inspiration of Rockwell. And the Muppets, obviously, Jim Henson. If you guys notice, if you're a big Muppet fan, Ted wears Fozzie Bear's tie. So it's the white tie with the pink polka dots. You'll see it. And yes, there he's wearing Fozzie's tie. And actually, if you go back to the kid, he's got a primary color shirt that's reminiscent of Ernie from Sesame Street. So there's all these little like hidden things going on. And the dad was loosely based off of Frank Oz. And this is Frank Oz and Jim Henson with Rolf the Dog on the Jimmy Dean Show in 1963. Not that I'm a fan, but the dad was inspired. And years later, Angela was a makeup artist now at NBC, and Frank Oz was on the Today Show. And she knew he was coming, so she gave him a copy of the book, and we wrote a little letter, and he wrote a lovely response, which we've included in the show, so you'll have to take a look at that. And then I get busy. I got work to do, bills to pay, Jesse. Lots of covers. There was kind of a lull right after Ted, and I was transitioning out of Magic the Gathering. I'd been done working for Dungeons and Dragons and was now starting to completely transition into children's books. But it takes a while to get frankly, to get that income to a point where you can just be doing kids' books.
Yeah.
So I took on a lot of cover work at this time.
And then came...
Bum, bum, bum.
Won a Caldecott honor.
Won a Caldecott honor. This, Kevin Lewis called one day and asked if I knew the poem, The Spider and the Fly. And I said, oh yeah, I know that whole poem. He goes, oh, you know the whole poem? And I go, yeah, will you walk into my parlor, said the spider to the fly. And then she walks into the parlor, and that's the end. So to give you an idea of the era, he's like, I'm going to fax you the poem. And the fax is coming out, and it's upside down, and I'm reading it as it's coming out, and it's going, and then it ends, and then I'm waiting for another page to come out, and I'm like, wait, this is it? This is how he just eats her. It's like Hannibal Lecter for kids? That's it? It's done? Oh my gosh, so I remember going, you should probably ask like Edward Gorey to do this, and he's like, Edward Gorey is dead, Tony. So, so I thought, okay, well, I love Tim Burton, obviously. I love Chaz Adams. I love Edward Gorey. Let's try to do it in the spirit of that, because I loved those books when I was a kid. I think because they spooked me, but they never terrified me, and I loved that spooky feeling. And so that's what I tried to conjure. But Jesse, we did not think this book would sell. I dedicated it to Holly Black and her husband Theo. They were the most gothy couple I knew, and I'm like, they are the only ones who will truly appreciate this book, but no one's going to buy a black and white book where the fly is a ghost and dead. But as luck would have it.
This is Kevin Lewis, your editor?
This is Kevin Lewis holding the Caldecott honor. He is not happy at all. You can tell. And this was First Lady Laura Bush at the time, reading it to a group of kids.
And then came
this. Spiderwick. If only that caught on.
Jeez, yeah. So you collaborated with Holly Black. How did you meet her?
This magazine. Holly, this magazine. There was a magazine called D8, which for the uninitiated is an 8-sided dice in Dungeons and Dragons. They tell you to roll the D8, or D20, or D6, depending on the dice. So this was really deep in nerddom, that the fact that this magazine was called D8. Angela and I had first moved to New York. We had just been there not very long, and they wanted to do an interview about my work on Dungeons and Dragons, and out comes this woman with her husband, Holly, and not only, I don't even know if it started out like, oh, you like Dungeons and Dragons? Yeah, I like Dungeons and Dragons. Oh, do you like Brian Froud? Oh, I love Brian Froud. Oh, do you like the Dark Crystal? I love the Dark Crystal. And it was just, no, me, no, you and me. So we had this incredible connection of loving all the same things, and what was what was amazing was Holly was so incredibly well read, but she also knew fairy folklore really, really well. So at some point, I remember showing her this idea of a field guide, a big field guide that I was thinking of about trolls and goblins and fairies, but it was very scientific, like Audubon. And she's like, I'll help you with the research on that. And then I remember showing it to Kevin and the team at Simon Schuster, and they liked it, but they were worried because it looked expensive. It looked risky, and but Kevin was fascinated by the backstory about Arthur Spiderwick, the guy who created the field guide, and he's like, I think this is 2 stories you're talking about. I think you're talking about a field guide, but I also think you're talking about the story about the field guide. That really fascinated me, that books could have a symbiotic relationship off of each other and kind of 2 different types of books. And it soon became apparent that I was in way over my head, despite saying, yeah, I can do all that. Yeah, we got that covered. And so Holly came on board as the author, and Holly and I collaborated on the story. But at the end of the day, Holly wrote the books. I did the pictures, but it was an unusual relationship in that I was able to look at the words that Holly wrote and ask questions and give feedback, and Holly was able to look at the art and also do the same. And usually in children's book world, that doesn't happen. You're usually kept separate. And so the end result, I feel, is richer because it's a dovetail of story created by 2 really different types of storytellers that create a third thing that is wholly unique. So there's more of the art. I looked at a lot of Grimm's fairy tales, Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales, the artwork of Arthur Rackham. Spiderwick himself was modeled after Arthur Rackham, and I wanted these to have that epic feeling. It was really Holly that had said, let's make the kids modern regular kids that don't have any special powers. And at first I really saw them as like old-timey kids, and it's scenes like this where you see a modern day kid with a unicorn that to me captures the real essence of Spiderwick.
You and Holly at the premiere?
There we are, looking snazzy. Holly looking far snazzier than I. And then this happened.
How did you feel?
That just happened. You know what you guys can't see? On the side is Ronald McDonald holding Arthur Spiderwick's field guide, which is a really weird feeling, especially as a kid growing up in the 70s when maybe McDonald's wasn't as bad for you, or we just didn't know how bad it was for you. Yeah, it was an unbelievable, very strange and surreal experience to see these books turned into a film. Oh, you want me to move along? Okay. Yeah, we'll get there. And then we did more books, and then the big field guide came out. Finally, yes. And because we flip-flopped it and did the story first and then the field guide, it was able to work, and that was a bit of brilliance on really Kevin and Angela. I feel like the 2 of you guys were kind of scheming on that kind of idea of doing that. And I think it worked. And then we did a sequel, Beyond Spiderwick Chronicles, shortly thereafter. And then that came out. That was my alphabet book. Now can I do my alphabet book? Fine, Tony, you can do your alphabet book. So this is an alphabet book that does not teach the alphabet. It actually makes fun of alphabet books. And it features a young version, smart-ass version of myself here. And then we circle back to the Reluctant Dragon. So I had this idea of I wanted to re-illustrate the Reluctant Dragon by Kenneth Grahame, and Kevin was worried that perhaps the text was a bit too Victorian. We weren't sure that modern kids would be as attracted, so he kind of challenged me to retell it. And again, I didn't want it. It was very. Here's a parallel with the Mr. Wetzel thing. It was like a Friday. He's like, why don't you? I don't know if I want to. Tell you what, Tony, it's Friday. On Monday, why don't you come back, write a chapter or 2, and let's see what you can do. And then by Monday, I had like 4 chapters written, and I was on my way.
Right.
And then
Mino.
What are you going to say about Mino? I want to hear what you have to say.
I'll tell you what I'm going to say.
Oh, you tell me what you're going to say.
So Tony and Angela wrote this great series of books called Adventure of Mino about this alien kid and his friends. And because of the Amazon Vine program,
well, yeah, that's part of it.
They distributed books to people who necessarily were not children's book fans.
Yeah.
And so you can tell half the people really loved it and half really hated it.
Let's read this one-star review. Like other reviewers, my 3-year-old picked this up from the library today. I started reading it and thought it was some badly translated rip-off book. Nope. A little internet research has led me to believe that the authors wrote this book from an English as a second language perspective on purpose. I am unimpressed with this book. It provided a lot of entertainment for my husband and me when we thought it was written by someone who hardly spoke English. I'm glad I didn't spend any money on this. So was it gifted to them? Was it?
I don't know.
I like that they thought I was making fun of people who were English second language, but they thought that was funny when that was the joke. Mino started out as a couple of things. One, Angela and I love to laugh. And actually, to be honest with you, it's one of those things when you hear about this when someone's life is going up really high, there are also very low lows. And while the Spiderwick Chronicles were being filmed in Montreal, our dog died, Goblin, who had been my muse for many years, and Angela's grandmother, who she was very close with, passed away, and we had the blues. We were bummed out. It was really tough to be in the house. We would go up to Montreal and watch them film for a little while, but when we came back home, it was a tough time. And at the same time, one of Angela's best friends, whose name was Joe, but his nickname was Mino. And so we would ask him like, oh, Joe, have you seen Stranger Things? Me? No. And so Joe was on the road. He was a makeup artist for Wicked. Maybe you've heard of that Broadway show. And he was feeling homesick. And so we had been joking about this for years, and we wanted to make these books. And you and I were laughing. And then we sent them to Joe, who also thought they were hilarious. And then we brought them into Simon & Schuster. And John Shuska happened to be in the office that day, who did books like The Stinky Cheese Man, very irreverent author, and he thought they were hilarious. And they were like, we're publishing these. And we were like, okay. And we had a great time, but the whole point of these books was to laugh with your kid while reading a book. And Mino was supposed to be like, nanu nanu, shuzbutt, I am from Earth, I Mino,
So some people didn't get it, but...
no, but that guy did.
That guy did, yeah.
Mark Hamill got it. And Joe Duluth is actually, Mino is here tonight, so you guys will have to say hi to Mino. He is, he's very inconspicuous. And you have yellow hair, which is great, so they'll have no problem finding you.
And then the WondLa trilogy.
The WondLa trilogy, while we worked on the Spiderwick Chronicles, I was fascinated with the concept of a story coming from the past forward to the present. So my mind did like a Mobius strip and went a story from the future coming back to the present. And that's where the beginnings of WondLa happened. So the early WondLa books, the story at the beginning of WondLa is actually in the late 90s as the story of Spiderwick is coming together. And by this time I was working with a different editor, David Gale, and David was a fantastic editor in that I felt like I leveled up as a writer. Like I really wanted to be a real writer at this point. And coming out of Spiderwick, I mean, I shared that story plotting with Holly, but Holly ultimately did the writing, and I'd written a short retelling in Kenny and the Dragon, but I'd never done something big and giant in my brain. And so this was my attempt to tell a story from the future about family. It's really all about family. So I was intrigued with Dorothy Gale from The Wizard of Oz, Alice Little from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and Wendy Darling from Peter Pan, and how all those stories are really about a young girl leaving home to go to a Wonderland or a Neverland to kind of find themselves a little bit, and then they return home wiser. My daughter was born right as I began these books, and I started thinking about what it would be like for Sophia and how she would grow up, and what you're thinking of that, and what will the world be like when she's older, and so there's a lot of introspection going on during these books.
Great.
This guy liked them.
Yeah.
Al Roker. And
Terry Hatcher did the audio guide?
Terry Hatcher did the audio for these, and with help from my amazing publicist Maggie Begley, we began. I had been working with the Starlight Foundation for many years, and basically, when I do a book tour, I go to a hospital and I go do my book event for kids in hospitals. It's that simple. And Terry joined me on this one in Los Angeles Children's Hospital, and she read and I drew, and you know, just
excellent
doing that. Then it just gets stupid,
yeah,
Jesse. It's just like it's crazy now. Yeah, it's off the.
Well,
off
if you look in one of the cases, there's a drawing Tony did of Yoda based on Ralph McQuarrie's original designs. He was the original designer for Star Wars.
Yes, yes. Not me. Ralph McQuarrie was. Yes, yeah.
And so you were asked to write text for his illustrations.
I mean, the phone rang, and we have the little caller ID, and Ange goes, "Tony, yeah." Lucasfilm's on the phone, and you're like, should I take a picture of this? And so one of the editors there said, you know, we're huge fans, and George loves your work, and we were wondering if you could take Ralph's artwork and retell the original Star Wars trilogy in picture book form. And I said, wait, I want to just make sure I understand exactly what you're telling me to do. You don't want me to draw? No. You want me to take pre-existing artwork, yes, from a story that's already been told, yes, and put it in the form of a book, yes. Do I get a royalty? Yes. I mean, I was waiting for Mom to wake me up and go, it's 7th grade, rise and shine.
And on top of that,
and then, yes.
You get to meet your heroes.
Yeah, how about that? Mark has, if you guys don't know, aside from his acting career, he has an amazing voiceover career. Mark's done some amazing voiceover work, most notably from the Batman animated series.
The Joker.
And Mark did the audio books for the Spiderwick Chronicles and did a fabulous job reading them. And so this was at one of the celebration events. And if you look, I think you can see my excitement by the color of my face. It looks like I'm about to explode because of that. And who knew that would be a bit bittersweet with, you know, seeing Carrie there.
And then you get a call from
And then this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just so you guys know, the way my brain works, it's a log jam of ideas, because people are like, how do you get your ideas? And so I'm a constant machine they're all churning in my brain, and so now they get to steep for years, but I'm constantly like a shark that's moving. I can't stop. So I go from okay, this book's wrapping up, now I'm getting ready to start my next book. But after WondLa, I was a little fried up. So we did the big collection of D&D art, I did the Star Wars book, and I was gearing up for my next book. And then Mo Willems calls from Paris and says, you know, Tony, I've written a book, and I've tried to do the art that kind of looks like your art, to be honest with you. And my wife, Cher, says, you know who draws like Tony DiTerlizzi? Tony DiTerlizzi. And I think he owes you money, so I bet if you call him up. So I got to work with Mo to tell a story together. We got to visit Paris, which I've never been to before, to really steep myself in the culture and this amazing and beautiful city. And I feel like the book is richer for that. But I have to say, the thing that drew me to this was that I have a lot of... The best I can liken it to is, if you guys have ever seen Kung Fu Panda, at the very beginning when Po is playing with action figures of all the things, that would be me playing with an action figure of Mo Willems. I have such respect for the children's book industry and the fascination with all the people, both present and past, who have pushed this industry into an amazing new place. And I felt like I was fascinated with Mo and his success, and I felt like he was coming from such a different place than me. And so the real payout, Jesse, wasn't really, it was, I don't even know how to say it, it was the experience. I wanted to experience making a book with this person who I really admire, who's a real genius at making books for children. Mm-hmm. And so I thank you, Mo, for inviting me to do that with you. It was a great experience.
I think we're running out of time for the interview portion, so we'll skip the influences. There's a great interactive in the back, though.
Great interactive. Lots. I stole this.
Arthur Rackham?
Just keep going. I stole that. I stole that. I stole that. That. We stole it. No, actually, I mean, truth be told, it's all, there's a big interactive that goes into a lot of detail about how I'm looking at a lot of different art to influence my art. It was never just one artist. There was lots of different things. And I think of my books as almost like a director thinks about a film and what's the look that feels right for the story. Mm-hmm. And then I did that, and then that, and some more of that, and then this guy.
Yeah. So your father was a member of the famous artist school, right?
My dad was in the famous artist school. Dad and mom both did a lot of the exercises, so I grew up looking at those giant red books. And
just as an aside, we have a great exhibition on the famous artist school next door.
That's good. Yeah, get to see the original drawings.
Yeah.
And so Rockwell was a huge part of my childhood. There's my self-portrait with Ted. Oh, wow, nice.
Yeah,
nice.
So tell us about this.
Plug in the new one. I like it. Justin Shonda's going to like that too. He's going to be very happy. This is my new picture book I'm working on now. It's a Christmas story. I love Christmas. I love the holidays. And I wanted to do a story about Christmas, but I never quite knew. And I love Rudolph, and I love Frosty. I love all those things. I loved him as a kid. I love him as an adult. And a couple of years ago, Angela and I were decorating the tree, and my daughter Sophia was lacing the hooks on these ornaments, and she dropped one of the glass ornaments. Goes all over the floor, and she kind of cringes. And she's like kind of waiting for the, like, well, how is this going to shake out? And I remember kind of doing this when I was a kid and be like, hey, those things cost money. What do you pay attention? And so I didn't want to ruin that. So I knelt down and I said to Sophia, you know, it's okay. Sometimes when you break an ornament on accident, a Christmas fairy is born. And Ange goes, that's your next book, dude. That's it. That's your book. And I went, no. That's just... Come on, John Denver and the Muppets is playing. We're hanging stuff. I've got eggnog. No. That's your book. No. So then I took a picture of the ornament broken, and then 9 zillion internet people went, is this your next book? And so it took me about 3 days for it to get through my thick skull, and I finally thought, maybe there's a book there. So this is, wow, this is the first time a lot of people are seeing Tinsel, who is the fairy who comes out. Which is really just a tiny version of Angela, and Tinsel is hidden somewhere in the exhibit, so you guys will have to find her, but she is there, hiding. Good luck. But she's
and let's end with this, you and Sophia.
Yeah, I get a lot of people who ask if Sophia likes to draw. Sophia likes to do a lot of things, just like me when I was a kid, and I was asked to do a piece for Reading is Fundamental for their charity auction. Their fundraising, and I wanted to do this with her. So Sophia drew the truffula trees on this, so I drew the Lorax, she drew the trees, then I handed Sophia the brush, and Sophia painted the trees, and so Sophia and I both painted this piece together, and it was very meaningful to me, and yeah. And that looks like my dad, actually, now that I look around. It looks like my dad. And that's him. Clean your room. If you don't want to go, if you want to go out and play, I need you to clean your room. Take out the trash. No, sorry, just kidding.
All right. I think we've got time for a few questions.
All right, I like that.
Anyone? Yes?
The power of boredom. Well, okay, so part of now doing books for nearly 20 years, I've been fortunate enough to tour all over this country and visit schools. I've been able to tour the UK and parts of Europe as well. And I started to realize that you start to measure your childhood against maybe perhaps the children of now and today. And I think that one of the things that I had that I didn't realize was so special was being bored. Being alone in my room, not being engaged in anything. No television, because there really was no good television on, except 7 o'clock on Friday when the Muppet Show was on, or Saturday morning. And so that idea of being alone and what happens when you finish processing out all the active stuff in your mind, then what happens? And for me, that's actually when I got the most creative, was when I was bored. That's actually when it's almost like sliding a giant grate off the top of your brain and then going under. That's where that Gondwanaland book came from. That's where all those drawings of the rock stars that I did during the 80s, that all came out of boredom. And now, to be honest with you, I worry that children are so constantly engaged in something that they have all this incredible knowledge at their fingertips, but I worry a little bit that they don't get a chance to be bored. And furthermore, boredom helps me just, it's almost like put away the day, or the things that are bothering me that seem elevated or more intense than they really need to be. It's when I'm bored and I'm either drawing or I'm listening to music, or, I mean, for some people it's meditating, maybe going for a walk. But the idea of being calm or letting your brain kind of finish that wind down, where do you go from there? And so that I also feel that I'm a bit of proof that boredom really can be a positive thing growing up.
Great. Any other questions?
Whoa, cricket.
No one.
They want to see the art, dude.
We're good? Stephanie? Would you like to close this out?
Sounds good. Thank you so much for those wonderful insights.